Welcome to day 2 of this important week, focusing on water for development, which is water, week on water for development. It's been so far very interesting, exciting, starting from yesterday, and we've had a lot of interaction, a lot of people coming in with interesting, as well as questions. So I'm hoping that this continues through the week. My name is Claude. I'm calling in from Zambia, right in the heart of Africa, from Zambia, and an M&D and research expert focusing mostly on water and sanitation. And I will be the moderator for this session for the next 15 minutes or so, just to look at the recap for yesterday and also moving forward, looking at the agenda for today's interesting sessions. So welcome everyone, and have a very interesting day again, as it were yesterday. So just jumping into it, we'll get into a recap just to look at what was deliberated yesterday. Yesterday, like I mentioned, was a very interesting day with focus on climate resilience. Starts with water, and this is the recap I'm going to give this morning. Next slide. So just a few things to note as we proceed. This session will be recorded, so that simply means that you've granted automatic permission for us to, record the session. Please, if you do not want to be recorded, you may leave the session. Then the recording will be made available after the session, and is for us to enjoy if you're not speaking. It's important because sometimes we get a lot of feedback and noise in the background. So please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Okay, so yesterday, like I mentioned, was very interesting, and we started off with a keynote looking at water in exceptional times. And the key takeaways from this session include the fact that water plays an absolutely pivotal role in achieving our ambitions of a resilient, just, zero carbon future. And so this presentation was, more focused on water in exceptional times. And we also looked at, water in form of a shark. So if you look at, if you think of climate change as a shark, then water is the teeth that can bite. And then we also had a discussion in terms of, in water we see our first line of defense to tackle disease outbreaks, multiple disease outbreaks, including diarrhea diseases and others. And the fact that the water crisis and climate crisis are not two separate events. They are closely intertwined, and they are one in very meaningful ways that should be treated as one. And then also to just reiterate what we discussed in terms of thinking of water as the heart of the race for resilience as we move on the road to Glasgow. So it's at the heart of the race for resilience. And that is a shark that you see there. And that just reinforces what I was talking about earlier from this session, that you look at it from the perspective of a shark with very sharp teeth in there. And then we moved on to look at stop floating and start swimming. This was yet another interesting session, which really focused on water as being essential for successful climate adaptation. And the fact that the water sector offers a set of approved as well as innovative approaches and tools to enhance the climate resilience of vulnerable people as well as the ecosystems. And also the fact that the water sector can address several issues that arise from climate projection uncertainties through robust but flexible solutions, such as the simple water storage systems. And that water offers vast and yet untapped climate mitigation potential. And yesterday we also did have interesting conversations around, the ecosystem-based mitigation, which often comes along with several core benefits in the field of biodiversity, as well as human well-being. So in wrapping it up, there is a book that has been published entitled Report on Water and Climate Change, Stop Floating, Start Swimming, Water and Climate Change, Interlinkages and Prospects for Future Act. And I think yesterday the link to access this book was shared. Very interesting read that everyone should tap into and ensure that we read. Then we had a session on climate resilient water resource management, where we had very interesting lessons from India, as well as interesting participation, where we had more than 160 participants speaking from Jordan, India, including GIZ and government and academia people. And it mostly looked at water adaptation and its importance to energy as a mitigation measure. So we did look at improved approaches for planning and financing climate resilient water management. And also, there were discussions around two publications that have been launched. One of them, and there's a link there which you can use to access the publications, but mostly focusing on composite water resource management framework, as well as a convergence model of financing climate resilient water management. So in terms of learning on climate resilient water resource management, there's more innovation. We need more cross-country learning, focused work on sustainable development goals, NDCs, and other agendas as required. Then we also had conversations around wastewater sector being a massive carrier of electricity consumption, and that the potential of energy reduction and GHG reduction in the sector is high. And also, re-emphasizing the fact that we need to reuse treated wastewater in order to reduce the stress on water resources. So TSM Jordan had a presentation which is a success story, and recommended to be introduced in other regions and countries to increase the quality of treated wastewater and therefore increase reuse. So Jordan had a very nice story there to tell about, how to increase quality of treated wastewater and reuse. And then we had conversations around watershed management and monitoring plans to ensure the water safety for drinking purposes. So the Jordanian government has incorporated the concept of resilience and mainstreaming climate change adaptation into its water strategies and master plans, which is a good story for everyone to learn from. And that is the model that is used to develop appropriate indicators on resilience in water projects. So we had conversations around the fact that there is no universal indicator to adapt as for mitigation. And also that adaptation indicators depend on the environment and social context, depending on the country where you are. And this can also change. And also concluding that there are no standard metrics to adaptation. Although we also recognized from this session that indicators can measure a broad variety of aspects, from project level to national to global level, and from climate risks to long-term impacts. And indicators have multiple purposes, which include monitoring activities, communicating progress, tracking financial flow, and so on and so forth. And that is just a framework on how to develop appropriate indicators on resilience in water projects, as an example of multi-layered indicators in water resource management from Bolivia. So that's what you see in the chart there. It just indicates resilience indicators at different levels with different participants, including stakeholders, an enabling environment, capacity development, and then on the other side you have, a participation of science and youth, and institutional regulatory systems, as well as adaptive capacity. So that is just a framework that we can learn from in terms of developing appropriate indicators on resilience in water projects. Then we had the mitigation and adaptation opportunities, perspectives for the WASH sector, guidelines, experiences, and donorship. And again, we discussed the fact that it is necessary to break traditional to have successful collaboration. And this session really focused on different types of collaboration, looking at mitigation and adaptation in the urban water cycle, as well as other players that can play a critical role. And now, especially with the pandemic, we are talking more about, digital communication, for example, which has shifted the way we, successfully collaborate, and also looking at fostering willingness to have more cross-sectoral projects instead of having projects that exist in silos, and strengthening regional exchange. So these are all key components of breaking traditional silos in order to have successful collaboration. The Sustainable Development Goal Collaboration Wheel, this looks at SDGs 6, 7, and 13, and just provides a very useful framework, to use when it comes to collaboration, and how this can be put into action. So what you see there is a wheel that has different components of collaboration, especially when it comes to the collaboration for SDG number 6, 7, and 13. Again, the wheel is moving there, which just shows, that we need to establish a link between the roadmaps and the collaboration. There was a very interesting presentation from Waklim, Susanna, and others who presented on how this collaboration could be linked, not just existing on its own, but between the roadmaps and the wheel. There has to be some kind of movement from the roadmaps, and the collaboration wheel moves towards the common targets. And then in terms of achieving climate smart utilities, digital tools for ambition increase, we recognize that emissions from the water sector do matter. So when you look at water handling, as well as the electricity consumption, all these depend on water as a resource. So emissions from these matter quite a lot. And there are methods and tools that have been developed to monitor these emissions. So from Zambia, there was some demonstration of that. And so there is no excuse for us, because there are tools and monitoring methodologies that have been developed for this. And these efforts need to be complemented at the national policy level. It's not just at program or project level, but it should be complemented at the national level through integrated water aspects. So we are at the crossroads, and we looked at what will the future mix of assets look like, looking at two angles of wastewater as well as the water supply, and there was a presentation on this which looked at how you can move along the chain to embed issues of vision and knowledge, policy framework, guidelines, and to improve how the future asset mix looks like in terms of wastewater and water supply. And that's what you see in green there. Resource factory approach, and also reducing reuse water of different quality for different purposes and protecting catchments. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so that was about yesterday. And then moving on, we are going to have a key quote of Louis Boston, and this will be screened by Matthias. Matthias, are we ready to screen that?
Welcome to the thematic day on finance and governance of the Week on Water for Development. I'm Louis Borston from the Osprey Foundation. Here are 3 questions that we at Osprey think about when looking at new financing opportunities. First, are we paying for sustainable service delivery and not just hardware? Second, is the approach likely to be replicable and therefore scalable? And third, is the approach realistic about what can be funded with grants as compared to repayable finance? Opportunities that meet these 3 criteria are more likely to have real impact in the long run. So please think about them as you enjoy today's sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just quickly run through. I know that we are running out of time already. Time is moving very fast. So today's agenda is very tight, and we are focusing on mobilizing and directing financing resources for water. And there are several presenters for this. We'll start with understanding the political economy for water infrastructure, and then move into tracking down and learning from smooth financial and technical cooperation. And then later in the afternoon, we'll look at subsidies viewed through the equity lens, rethink and reform. and then move into wash needs for funding, and also what role government can play. Governments pay your bills. This is coming later in the day. So generally, this is what we are going to cover today. And I'm cognizant of the fact that the other session is just about to start or has already started. So I'll end here and maybe allow people to transition to the next presentation and discussion, which is about understanding the political economy for water infrastructure.